Hi, I'm Nate.
And I'm Tessa.
And welcome to our wedding! Before we get started today,
we wanted to tell you some stories about how we got together.
And how we got to be where we're at right now.
At our wedding. So, I met Nate. in San Francisco. I heard about him for a long time before I met him. Our mutual friend Darcy was my roommate and had used to live in Oregon, and where Nate's from. And he was a rock and roll guy, and he used to put on shows. And Darcy was telling me, hey, you know, this guy who, you know, might want to know about him, and, you know, you do shows sometimes, and maybe you guys could talk music or something. He only lived three blocks away from me, and we both worked evenings. So he would come and hang out with me after he got off of work, and then we would ride the bus home together.
It was good times. Except I was getting really, really lonely, and I started crying a lot. And one day I went over to Tessa's house, and I was just kind of sharing with her how much I hated life. And she started praying for me, and she said, man, there's a lot of fear and bitterness in you. And I'd never really thought that I had very much fear or bitterness. And she really just put a spotlight on where my heart was at. And the next 2 years I ended up spending dealing with fear and bitterness because I had a lot in me. And the reason that came to the surface was because of Tessa. And I really started valuing her as a friend. But we still couldn't be together because I didn't like her.
And I sometimes would think maybe I liked him, but then there were times I definitely didn't, and we could never be together.
And we told lots of people all these excuses why we couldn't be together. We couldn't communicate. Sometimes I just couldn't stand to be around her. And I'd find myself, you know, kind of starting to develop this pendulum swing. Sometimes she was my best friend, and other times I was like, gotta hang out with somebody besides Tessa. And it would just go back and forth and back and forth. And
to be quite honest, I didn't really love his music very much at the time. I could never be with someone if I didn't love their music, if I couldn't support them in that.
After a while of us convincing ourselves that we could never be together, we started going on these things that we refer to as not dates, where I'd take her to a Christmas party, or we'd go see a movie. We watched National Treasure together, and we were the last ones in the theater.
And he paid,
and it sure felt like a date. But it wasn't. But I started getting really confused because of this pendulum swing started going back and forth, and I asked God, I'm like, why? Why do I love her and hate her at the same time? And I felt that he said, when it happens, I'm there. Which meant, to me, well, when you guys are together and it's going good, I'm there.
And it's true. Man, when we hang out together and we pray for people together, I get to see his heart, and I get to see our lives connecting, and I get to see that we care about a lot of the same things.
And it kind of put a weird burden on me because I couldn't like her. I told so many people I couldn't stand her half the time. So after a couple years in San Francisco, I decided I was going to move and go on tour. And I got a big green van.
I loved the van so much. I was so jealous that he got to ride around in a van and I was stuck in San Francisco still.
This whole time I was starting to like Tessa more and more, but I couldn't tell her. Because after all, I was about to go get in my van and drive around the country for 6 months, and that's not a good way to be a boyfriend.
And I was thinking, oh, Nate's moving away. I guess that's the end of that. Well, oh well. I wasn't really that concerned because I wasn't, you know, I was going to miss him as a friend a lot, but I had already marked him off of my list of possible suitors.
Little did she know.
And about a week later, I put in his CD, and I listened to the CD, and I read the liner notes, and I read the zine that he made, and through that whole hour of just soaking it up, something shifted in my heart, and I finally got it. And I was like, oh, that's why Nate makes his music. That's what it's about. Like, it's encouraging to people. And it's kind of hopeful, and it's sympathetic and caring, and anyway, it was all things I couldn't recognize before. And so I called him and apologized. And I called and I was like, Nate, I'm sorry for not being a very good friend, and I didn't really get your music, and I didn't support you as much as I should have, and now you're gone, and I'm really sorry that I didn't support you better, and I'd like to in the future.
And I accepted her apology. Because one of the things that we learned through our time in San Francisco is that for our friendship to survive, we had to have a clean slate. Which meant that every couple weeks or every couple months, we'd have to sit down and tell each other how we were annoying each other. And we'd have to forgive each other and learn to make differences and compromises. And that's what our friendship ended up being based about, was communication and being able to resolve things. And so I'm still on the road and I'm thinking, man, this girl's really awesome. I bet we could build something together. But at the same time, I wasn't totally convinced I could tell her I liked her. And I was driving around the country, and we'd still talk on the phone every night. And I ended up in Columbus, Ohio. And I had a friend, Eric, there, who sang a song that really convicted my heart, that I'd built up some walls against, some walls with false definitions of beauty that had kept me from really seeing how awesome Tessa was. And so that night I went home and I prayed, and I really felt God convicted my heart through Eric's song that, you know, I'd judged Tessa when I shouldn't have. And so I started just really searching inside my heart about, like, what have I said that wasn't true about this woman? And I found a whole laundry list of things that I'd done wrong. And I had to say I'm sorry, and I had to kind of work them through in my heart. And after about that month, I called up Leo, who is my pastor and friend, who's marrying us in a few minutes, and said, I think I like Tessa, and I'm going to tell her I like her. And we talked through the whole thing, and then I called my parents, and I told them I liked her. And my mom thought, man, something must have changed. Because we definitely had expressed our disinterest in each other. And
So summertime came, and I really wanted to go to Cornerstone Festival.
at the same time, I was kind of scheming that she'd maybe come join me on tour. And so we agreed that she was going to fly out and meet me at her dad's house in North Carolina.
And so I'm all excited about going to Cornerstone Festival, and I'm really looking forward to it, as I always do. But this year in particular, you know, I just turned 30, I'm still single, haven't really dated anybody.
She was going on a manhunt.
I was...
Yeah.
Okay, I was even embarrassed to tell people, but I was saying I'm really going to be looking this year when I'm at the fest, because it's time, Lord. I need a man. So we were at Walmart, and, you know, we were freshening up and getting ready to go to sleep in the parking lot, in the van, together, and I had prayed before I left on this trip that, you know, I knew that we might stay in the van together on tour, and I didn't want there to be any, you know, weird proximity issues of us liking each other just because we were so close and the opportunity was there. And so I prayed that I did not want that to happen, because, you know, I was going to find my man at Cornerstone Festival.
So we get out to the van and we get in our sleeping bags, and I'm all tied up in mine. It's true, you tied me up.
I didn't know, don't you know? We get in our sleeping bags.
And before too long, we started playing footsies through our sleeping bags. And then our hands started kind of creeping closer to each other.
And just a little bit closer and a little bit closer.
But we didn't quite touch.
Almost touched.
But I was like, okay, I'm just going to say it. Can I hold your hand? Because I think it would be fun.
I think it would be fun too.
And so we started trying to hold hands. But as any of you know that have stayed in a van for a night, it's really hard to hold hands in a van when you're laying next to somebody. And so we had to laugh because Because we didn't know how to hold hands.
Yeah, it was a little awkward.
That was awkward.
So we were holding hands for a little while, and I started to think, where is this going? So I turn to him and I say, so, this changes things.
Yeah, I like you.
What? For how long?
Well, a couple years.
Really?
Yeah, I've written songs about you.
Which ones?
Ambulance.
What? He had that song for so long, like at least a year or two.
And she could never understood what it meant, because I could never tell her.
There were a lot of songs like that. Everything became so much clearer now.
So we drove on. Now we were dating. We called everybody.
No. We waited till we knew we actually were really dating.
The first day was really awkward, and I got frustrated because we didn't tell anybody. And I hadn't had a girlfriend in 10 years.
And I hadn't ever kissed anyone in 10 years. And then I found out he hadn't kissed anyone in 10 years either. That was pretty impressive. I never thought I would get someone like that. So now that we were dating and we were a couple, I was thinking about something. We were headed to Cornerstone Festival, and the last thing I wanted to do is have to deal with my first kiss in 10 years, surrounded by 20,000 of my closest friends. So I told him that we needed to have our first kiss before we got to Cornerstone.
And I told her, well, if the timing's right, I didn't want to rush this sort of thing.
He blushed. That's what he did.
So 3 days later, we had our first kiss in my van.
And we laughed our heads off and thought, well, we'll get better at that.
It was really bad. The next day, we went to McDonald's.
And we're being all gooey and ooey and
And I was like, oh.
across the booth table, over our big breakfasts.
I love you so much more than I did 4 days ago. I said it!
And I thought, said what? Oh, it probably means love. Oh, whoa!
I do love you.
Wow! I love you too!
And it was true. I did love her. The next 2 weeks, I went on to see everywhere she'd ever lived and met every member of her family.
He got to see Nashville and Chicago and my mom's house in Pennsylvania, and then he left to finish his tour. So I went back to San Francisco and I thought, what am I doing here if Nate's in Portland? Strange things started happening to me once we were in a relationship. I got kind of emotional. And I started crying a lot more than I was used to crying. And every time, Nate would be wonderful. He would hold me, or he would talk to me over the phone and pray with me, and he would be comforting, and he'd say the right things, and he would be so loving. And he never rejected me. Over and over and over again. Every time I expected, oh, this time I'm just being so annoying. I'm being such a nuisance. I can't believe he's not saying I've had enough. But no, he just kept loving me. It was amazing. Now I'm gonna cry.
Are you laughing or crying?
Both.
Hey, I can't tell. Come here. Awesome. So good things started happening when we got together. Tessa started crying, as she put it, and I thought it was beautiful. She was blossoming into somebody that I'd never even known before. She wasn't the same person that I started dating. And a month later, she moved to Portland. And I got caught in the transition between single guy living alone in his van, planning on touring the rest of his life, and meets man in a very serious relationship that couldn't tour anymore. And I decided that Tessa was worth not traveling anymore if it meant being with her, because she was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So Tessa had been in Portland less than 2 months and thought it was time to ask a big question. So on October 21st, we got engaged. And it's been amazing. You're here at our wedding 4 months later. And we're so happy.